Okay, so good afternoon. So for today, we're going to discuss about mobile programming week 3, about this lesson. No? So after this lesson, we will be able to expect that the student will be able to create a custom AVD, understand the basic overview of an application or app, the activity stage of an Android programming, running the state changing example, of course, and designing the user interface and some additional user interface. Okay? So, as I mentioned, no, the first topic that we're going to discuss about create ABD master images. No, you have many options actually to custom master's images. No, you can use SSEM to create custom master images for the ABD host pool. No, if you don't have SCCM infra and SCCM master's images, you can assure no yung Azure VM or virtual machine to build custom images. So the Azure VM Imagers Builder lets you start with a default Windows virtual machine template or custom visual machine images in Azure to add your customization. Another option of the AVD custom image process is explained in some other aspect. Now, how did I create AVD custom image? You just, as started for the Azure OS template as part of the manual testing and created virtual machine in Azure to test the master image, you need to log into the Azure portal, of course. You need to create a new Azure Windows virtual machine with a 10 enterprise template and run as sysprep and shutdown. Click on the capture button and create a managed image. No? Create a new AVD host pool using the AVD IRM or Azure portal template using the managed image. No? So the current AVD ARM template installed the agent and bootloader, no, and the current AVD ARM template for a new session host pool can use a custom image without agent and bootloader pre-install. Installing the RD agent and the bootloader in the AVD master image is one option for the custom images, but still does not solve the registration piece. So unless you use the following PS command to generate code, registration code, and use the code while installing the RD agent. So I'll just want to share a video presentation, of course, for a in this particular session or discussion will be focusing on the chance notation. Okay, so most of these symbols and their descriptions.
Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial what I want to do is I want to show you guys how to create your own custom AVDs, of course your virtual devices. I showed you guys how to use the default one earlier, but if we want to become expert app developers from the ground up, that's where we need to start. We need to understand pretty much what goes on behind the scenes, because after all these apps that people develop, they would be pretty worthless if we didn't have any phones or tablets to run them on. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and in the next tutorial, I think I said that last time, but in the next tutorial I promise we're going to be getting into the code, the designer, all that good stuff. So for now, hop up to this little thing. Remember, this is the AVD manager, and again, I already told you guys that I created my own custom one right here, and in the last example you guys may have ran this one and it may have taken up your whole screen, probably pretty annoying. So in this tutorial what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to create your own custom AVDs. So first of all, go down here to this little button and click create virtual device. Now of course the first thing we have to choose is what device do you want to create. Do you want to create a TV, a phone, a wearable like a watch, or a tablet? Well, I'm just going to go to phone, and then once I click that I get all of the definitions of phone. Now don't let the word definition fool you. These are pretty much just different phones. Like if you went into, I don't know, like a Verizon store or like a Best Buy or something, this is pretty much the equivalent of picking out which phone that you want. So of course this edited one is one that I was working on earlier, but let's just go ahead and pick out Let's use the Galaxy Nexus. That was actually a pretty popular one. So this is the Galaxy Nexus phone. Now the first thing that I want to do is I actually want to clone this, because if I start just editing this, then it's going to mess up the default settings. So you always want to clone it, and this is going to allow you to use a copy that if you mess up with, then you just messed up the copy, no big deal. So first of all, since this is our own custom phone, I'm going to name this thing anything that I want. So we'll say that I don't know, we'll say that we're making the slimmest phone in the world. So I'm going to call my phone Slim Shady, the new phone that's going to wipe out Samsung, wipe out Motorola. Slim Shady is the next big thing. All right. So anyways, there's my little daydream. Another thing that I want to point out is all of this stuff. Again, we're going to be customizing a bunch of stuff on this phone later on, but this is pretty much the hardware configuration. Now, you don't really ever want to change the hardware configuration of your phone, because it's not like they ever release phones with like 720 by 18 million pixels. You know, the hardware always stays the same for the most part. It's the software that changes. So again, give your device or your phone a custom name and click finish. And now if you go to phone, you can see, okay, this is our custom phone, same hardware, we didn't do anything stupid to it. So click on it and choose next. So now that we have pretty much the phone itself, and by that I mean just the hardware, we can go ahead and start working on the system image. So this is pretty much saying what version of Android do you want to use. Now I recommend putting the latest one on it, just because, I don't know, you know that. Oops, knocked over my mouse. Actually, by the way, this has nothing to do with app development or anything, but I started to get like carpal tunnel symptoms. So whenever I would type like my entire arm, there would be like a nerve that shot up, and I'd be like, oh my god, in the middle of my tutorial. So I got this cool little glove that had like beanbags in it, and I also got these things called a vertical mouse. So go to Google and type in vertical mouse. That's what I'm using. It's like this goofy looking mouse that I don't know, it kind of looks dangerous to be honest. But anyways, got a little sidetracked there. Back to the video. So what we want to choose is what version of Android do we want to put on that phone we just made. Well, a system image is pretty much just a copy of all the system files and settings. Pretty much just think of it as like your main system, your main computer. So the one I like to use is just x86 from Google. These all are open source, but I always just went with Google because, I don't know, they have like the best developers in the world, and you always know that their system image is nice, working correctly. It never gave me any problems, so I like to choose that one. Click next. Now here is where I like to do a couple of things to pretty much customize my virtual device. So again, this name looks pretty good. Alright, that looks good, that looks good. One thing that I like to do is I like to go to scale, and right now, the one you just saw, Bucky's phone, that was 4dp on device, 1 pixel on screen. Now what this does is it just shrinks it to make it fit better on your screen, because again, this screen size of the phone, it might be bigger than your desktop screen size. So again, whenever you're developing, it's going to give you some problems. I usually choose 4dp on device. 10dp is like a really mini phone. It looks like, I don't know, like the size of your, it's just way too small. So again, I'm going to choose, that was embarrassing. Anyways, moving on. So yeah, that's what I like to do. Now another thing I want to point out is this emulated performance, you can only choose one of these. And I'm going to recommend used host GPU. Now what this does is it allows the emulator to use your computer's graphics card, the actual computer, your desktop or laptop or whatever, to make it run faster. Now this snapshot, what this would do is it will pretty much keep the state of your emulator, so whenever you close out of it, it starts up faster again. So the reason I don't like this is because whenever you close your emulator, it has to save everything and it takes a little bit of time to close out. So I'm going to recommend use host GPU, which pretty much speeds up your emulator. And during your development process, you can just keep your phone running. So, as long as you keep it running, you shouldn't have any issues at all. So now that we have our virtual device set up, just click finish. And this takes a while to actually create it. But once we have it created, again, what we can do is we can actually edit it to go to this button. And of course, if you ever want to change any settings, maybe, okay, that was actually now while this is booting up, again, like I said, during your development process, you can actually just leave this entire emulator running. You don't need to close out of it like I don't know, maybe in some other like programming languages you're learning, you actually close out of a program whenever you're testing it and then rebuild it. Well, the cool thing is you can just keep this window open and then click this to rebuild your project, and it's pretty much just going to restart the app right in your emulator, so you don't have to wait for this to boot up every time. So again, there you go. There's your emulator. Again, this one was just a demonstration. I'm going to delete it because I already have that sweet one, Bucky's phone, that I'm going to use for the tutorials. But if you ever want to make your own custom emulators, your AVDs, or edit them, delete them, now you know how. So now that we know how to make those, we can finally move on to the good stuff. It's going to be awesome. So I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.
Okay, so this time we're going to have a discussions about understanding mobile apps, no? A basic overview. So a smartphone nowadays no can get through all kinds of things, no? That is the beauty of it, no? Since it's the new all-in-one technological advance. Much of the capabilities of a smartphone today are owned in part to mobile apps, which together with mobile hardware and made the modern world much more convenient. So it is for the reason that we find it necessary to provide you with a general understanding of mobile app in order to better navigate in increasingly complicated world actually, no? Now, uh, a mobile app, of course, is a software application developed exclusively for use on a small wireless portable device such as smartphones, tablets, and others, rather than on desktop or laptop computers. So mobile applications are frequently no less functional compared to the desktop ones, but still, no, these two belong to two entirely different spaces in the e-commerce world alone. And the m-commerce or mobile application commerce, no, is one of the different sphere that treats different customer segments and other consists of initiative aimed at different segments. So downloading a mobile application has never been easier. No? To download an app on your mobile, simply go to the app marketplace that fits with your mobile device's hardware, operating system, and process from there. So the specific as to which hardware or operating system goes with which store are as follow. No, we have iOS, Apple, no, we have Android at the same time. We need to take note that some listed apps might require you payment information or on account for download since those are paid apps, and which is why it's recommended that you should create an account in a store and set up a payment method beforehand. So if you heard to learn about mobile apps, you must experience first-hand its benefits. With mobile apps, people can now do virtually everything and everywhere. And you can read news from every corner in the world, browse weather forecast, which movies, or even do your business with mobile apps. While a mobile app works on an online connection for download, you don't necessarily need to be online anytime you need to use the app. Now, take the current emerging technology, progressive web apps, let's say for example, when breakthrough features such as offline capabilities and e-commerce stores for the first time ever and can serve this customer or their customer rather on and off the grid. No, so the technological world today is moving at a rapid and unprecedented pace. No, which is why in order for you to keep up with its speed, a constant refresh and depending on your knowledge in a mass. Okay, so and at the same time, it is important for you, of course, as an IT practitioner to understand how you'll be able to create a mobile applications. No? So I'll just want to share a video presentation again on how you will be able to perform, of course, an example of a basic overview of an app in a programming situations. Okay? So this time we're going to have an overview actually of the basic overview of an app or application.
Alright guys, welcome to another tutorial, and in this video what I want to do is I want to explain pretty much the overall structure of a really basic simple app. So make sure that you have, and these files should already be open because they probably open by default whenever you created your project, but if you accidentally close them, make sure you have this activity main.xml open, and that's of course an app, res, layout, activity main, and this one right here, main activity.java. And that's of course an app, Java, your com.thenewboston, my app, or whatever you named it package, and this file right here. So again, these two files open, and remember in the last couple tutorials, I said every single app is made up of these things called activities. Now for now, just think of an activity as a screen. So if you're making an app for, I don't know, like your website, you might have an activity for your profile page, you might have an activity for the home screen, you might have an activity for like the about section for your company or something, I don't know. But each app, like I said, is made up of these screens, and these screens, the technical name for them is an activity. So, with that being said, we can now talk about this. Each activity within your app is made up of two parts. The first part is the part we see right here. It's the user interface. It's where all your colors, your text, pretty much the design of your activity is going to be right here in this XML file. Now the brains of your activity is this Java file right here. For example, whenever you have a button on your activity and you click it, well, you need to tell that button to do something. So the smart intelligence of your activity is going to be all in this code, the Java file. So again, your app is made up of activities, different screens. Now each screen has pretty much a user interface, the design, and the smarts of it, or the brains of it, and that's a Java class. So pretty much, if we ever wanted to make another activity, what we would do is we would create a new class with a new name and a new XML file. Simple enough. So now that we understand pretty much the basic overview of what an activity is and what they're made up of, we can start talking about the different components of it. So hop over to this XML file, which I said is pretty much the interface, the layout of your entire app, what it looks like. Now, if you look at the bottom, we have two different tabs right here, the design view and the text view. Now, I want to mention this because this might confuse some people. This is actually just two different views of the same exact file. What Android Studio did is they built this tool that is pretty much just a user-friendly tool of working with the interface, but what it's actually doing whenever you, I don't know, like edit part of your interface, is it's actually editing an underlying file for you, and that's the XML file. So you can either do that with the design tool by dragging and dropping stuff and editing some settings, or just editing the source code directly. So let's actually go ahead and look at an example of this. The first thing I want to do is get rid of this. So hop over to your XML file in design view, click on this hello world, and then just hit delete on your keyboard. So we have a blank nothing here. So the first thing I probably should mention is this. What you can do to each of your activities is you can add widgets to them. Now, widgets are just little thingies that you add to your interface. And I say thingies because there's not really one word to describe all these things. For example, let's add one of these large text areas. And this is pretty much to add any static, not changing text. So let's just go ahead and drag that in the middle and type anything you want. So if you actually drag it in the middle, you're going to see these little green grid lines, and that's just to align everything properly. Now if you double click this, then you can edit the text of it, and I'm just going to type in like the new Boston, hit enter, and it changes. So it's really intuitive like that, not really hard to figure out. So you can also add some more widgets if you want. Again, like I said, I'm just demonstrating how to use the basic tools, so feel free to drag any of these widgets on if you just want to play around with it. For example, you have radio buttons and progress bars, all that stuff. So again, widgets are just thingies that you can add to your interface. Now again, you can either do that in design mode or text mode. So whenever you click text mode, it actually shows you a little preview right here, which is actually nice. So let's go ahead and just add one little property. So in your XML file right here, just so I don't leave you guys hanging and I do explain everything. If you guys never worked with XML before, it's pretty much like HTML, but you can use cool names for your tags. So if you don't know HTML or XML, then I'll probably recommend going to watch those tutorials. But as long as you know HTML, then you guys will probably be able to follow along with these tutorials fine. So again, a real quick overview. We're going to be talking about this in detail later on. This tutorial is just to give you guys a basic understanding. So right now, our main tag right here is a relative layout. Now, a layout is just a general overview of it's saying how widgets should be positioned on the screen. And there are different types of layouts that we can have, but it's pretty much the overall rules of how things can be laid out. Now, this text view right here is just this widget right here. So each widget you add actually adds a new XML element to your file. So say that we wanted to change the background color of this right here. Well, what we would do is actually go up to relative layout and add a new attribute. For right now, I just want to show you guys, if you type Android, colon, and type background, then what you can do is you can actually type in a value here. Now this is actually one of my favorite colors, 006699. It's a blue color that I use on my website a lot. So again, you can also pretty much edit the interface this way through the source code. So again, the XML is your interface. We looked at how to change it with design, this design tool, and we're probably going to be using this one more often. And also the source code directly is pretty much just like a website, kind of like Dreamweaver if you ever use that. So yeah, and actually what I want to do is actually click this widget right here, and you see that I just clicked that and it gave me some prompts. What I'm going to do is hit Control Z, and I'm going to show you guys this little tip. Over here in their component tree is pretty much an overview of your entire activity. So this is your entire screen. This is the layout of how the widgets are supposed to be arranged, and right here I'm going to click text view. So if you ever have a bunch of widgets and they're kind of hard to select, maybe they're close together or whatever, you can actually just select it right in this component tree and it's going to select it for you. So again, deselect it, select it again, make selecting your widgets a little bit easier. Actually, what I want to do to this is change the color of the text to white. So I'm going to select that widget, and I know the property for this is text color. So if I find that, I'm just going to click in, well, I guess I can just type it in and I know the value. The value of white is FFFFFF. And hit enter and check it out. Your text is now white. Probably the coolest app ever. Again, this tool right here, it isn't really that hard to understand, but we'll cover more about it later on. Got your widgets, component tree, properties, drag and drop, tomato, tomato. So now let's go ahead and hop over to this. Now there's actually one more file that I want to show you before I let you go. So each activity, like I said, is an XML and Java file. However, go up to your app and you're going to find a directory under it called manifest. Now expand this and you're going to find another XML file called Android manifest.xml. Now double click that to open it, and let me drag this all the way to the left. Alright, so to recap one more time, your app is more likely than not going to have a bunch of different activities. Now, this Android manifest right here, think of this like is the main manager for your app. It's where everything comes together. If you have a bunch of activities floating around, they can be kind of hard to keep track of. So what this does, again, it's the main file that pretty much manages your entire app. So each activity that you create, this is actually going to be a new element in the Android manifest file. So I'll actually talk to you guys about this right now. As soon as your application starts, of course, your phone doesn't know what to do. It says, okay, where do I go? You have a bunch of different activities. Well, what am I supposed to be doing? The very first thing that your phone's going to do is it's going to look for a file called Android manifest.xml. So it says, okay, I'm always going to look for this file right here. And right after I open this file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all of your activities. Now, right now, we only have one activity, so it shouldn't take it too long to find, but it's going to look through all your activities right here, and it's going to look for a property called, actually, all these properties are kind of important, but it's going to look for a property called launcher. Now, this launcher is pretty much saying that this is the main activity that you want to launch first. This is where your app's starting point is. So it says, okay, I found it. Now let's check out this activity. Alright, so it says the launcher is the main activity. So from here, you want me to go to the main activity. So it hops over here, and then it says, okay, well, what's the deal with this main activity? Well, all of this we'll talk about later. Essentially, all this activity does right now is it sets this as your layout, activity underscore main, right there. So again, 3 very important files, but that's essentially all our app is doing right here. Again, I'm going to be covering the details of everything later on, but your phone is going to look at this first, Android manifest.xml. It's going to look for the activity that it's supposed to launch. Now, ours says go to main activity, and all main activity does right now, can't talk, is it launches this layout. So what the user does is they click to open this app, and they see this layout, but now we know what's going on behind the scenes, so we can edit it and start making some really awesome stuff. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and
Okay. Before we may proceed to another topic, I just want to share something no from the activity in Android no. So human mind or conscious and responsible for what we feel, no, what we think, make us feel pain when we are hurt, no, physically or emotionally, which often leads to a few tears, laughing on saying or hearing something funny and a lot more. What happens to us is the real world physically, no, are interpreted by our minds, no, and we think or operate as per, no. So in a way, we can say that our body is just a physical object while once control us through every situation is our mind. So in case of Android, no, like view layouts and view groups are used to design the user interface, which is the physical appearance to our applications or app. But what is the mind or soul or conscious of our app? Yes, it is the activity. Activity is nothing but a Java class in Android, which has some predefined functions which are triggered at different apps stage, no? Which we can override to perform anything we want. Activity class provide us with empty functions, following us to be to the controller everything. Let's say, for example, if we have a functions specified by our mind, no, we use on seeing something funny. variables. No, although we know that what happens inside this, but what if we can override and provide our own definition to these functions? One thing that is different here in context to our example is that a human is created once a birth, no, and it's destroyed once at death. And for the time in between is controlled by the mind, soul, conscious. But an activity in Android programming is responsible to create and destroy an app infinite number of times. So apart from controlling the app, activity also controls creation, distraction, and other state of an app's life cycle. And there can be multiple activities in Android, no? But there can be only one main activity. For example, in Java programming, no, the execution of the program always begin with main method. No? Similarly, when the user presses an app icon, the main activity is called and the execution starts from the onCreate method of the activity class. No? So, uh, I'll just want to share, of course, a video presentations on how you'll be able to running a state. No? Uh,
Now, another tip that's going to make your Android Studio development process a little bit easier is this thing called code completion. And I'll show you guys how it works right now. So under this method right here, click where you would first start writing your method, and then hold down the Alt key on your keyboard and hit Insert. So right here, it's going to pop up a bunch of different things. What we want to choose Alright guys,
we just simply share first the activity stage, no, in
Alright guys, welcome to another tutorial, and in this Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this video, actually, the first thing I want you guys to do in this tutorial is go to your kitchen and grab a huge bucket of popcorn. And then after that, go to your bedroom and grab the most comfortable blanket you can possibly find, and then come back. Because once you have both those things, you're ready to hear the story, probably the greatest story I ever told. This story is called The Life of an Activity. So, if you're an Android developer, this might be a pretty interesting story, definitely pretty useful. It starts out like this. Every activity that you ever create is going to be a subclass of the special class that we didn't see yet called the activity class. So out there somewhere there's this activity class, and every activity that you create we're going to inherit from. Now remember, whenever we inherit from something, we get all of the cool methods from that class. Now if you're looking at this and you're like, okay, I can clearly see that main activity extends action bar activity. And extends just means inherit, of course, you guys know. So this is actually a subclass of action bar activity, but you said that every activity that I create is going to inherit from this activity class. Well, even though you can't see it directly right here, this action bar activity is inheriting from another class, and that class is inheriting from activity. So this main activity that we just created is like 4th generation of the awesome activity class. But I just want to mention that because if you guys are looking at all these methods, you're like, okay, where did all these methods come from that I'm overriding? Well, they came from that activity class, and all this class is it's pretty much a basic template that gives us a bunch of cool functions that we could use on whatever activities we create. So that's the purpose of that. So since we have all these cool functions, let's talk about what they are and why we need them. Well, every activity that you create, it goes through a certain life cycle. Now, the first thing that happens is it calls this method called onCreate. So whenever the user first starts your app for the very first time and your activity is born, it gets created. Now, in this activity, what you typically do is you set the layout. Of course, that makes sense. The very first thing you want to do is give the user a nice interface set up to look at. Now, just a real quick overview, and I'm going to talk to you guys about this in detail in just a second, but eventually, whenever they close out of your app, it's going to call other methods like onDestroy. So whenever your app, whenever your activity is about to get destroyed or die, what you might want to do is do things like save their data for them. So if they, I don't know, are playing a game or something, you might want to save all of their settings so they can have it the next time they open your app. So basically, what I'm trying to say is each activity that you create is going to go through many different stages in its life, or many different states, as it's more commonly referred to. So in this tutorial, that's what I'm going to be doing, talking to you about every single state and the details of each. So the first thing that you actually probably want to do is start your emulator, because I know they kind of take a long time to boot up, and we're actually going to be tweaking some of this code and changing some things. So yeah, go ahead and do that. Now, another thing I want to mention is this. I'm going to be talking to you guys through each stage of your activity's life, and instead of just me explaining it and talking through, I figured it would be a better idea to actually print something out on the screen every time the state of your activity changed. So what we can do is we can actually import this cool class, and this is another tip. You guys are going to learn like 2 things in this tutorial. Bonus information. Alright, so if you go to android.util.log, what this is pretty much a package that lets us print out log information. And all we're going to do is we're going to print out something on the bottom of the screen that says like, your activity is being created or something. So that's all we're doing. Alright, so once we have that imported, go above all your methods and we're going to make a new, let me scroll down here. We're going to make a new private static final string variable, not string, and I'm just going to name this tag, and it's good convention to name it tag just because in the documentation for this is just what you do, and you guys are going to see what this does in a second. Well, I probably should talk you guys through this. So the purpose of this tutorial is to talk to you guys about the different states of your activity. Now, by default, your emulator is going to be sending out a bunch of different messages pretty much when any event happens, and there's a lot of crap that happens on your phone, but we are only interested in these messages regarding states. So just to filter out the important messages, we're going to make a special tag and stick it on each activity. It's going to be called Bucky's message. You can actually name this anything you want because it's just like a unique identifier to say only print out these log messages and not all the other crap that we don't care about. Alright, so once we have that, what I want you to do is go down to onCreate right here, and I'll show you guys how to add one of these log messages. So if you go log.I, what you can do is you can throw in 2 parameters right here. The first parameter is your tag. So this is just Bucky's message, and this is just for filtering out the important ones later on. Now after this is what do you want to print out on the screen, and I'll just actually print out the state of this activity. So again, that's all these 3 lines of code do right here. And they're actually really helpful whenever you're trying to debug something in your Android development process.
This will be the continuation, an example of a running state changing example.
Now another tip that's going to make your Android Studio development process a little bit easier is this thing called code completion. And I'll show you guys how it works right now. So under this method right here, click where you would first start writing your method and then hold down the Alt key on your keyboard and hit Insert. So right here, it's going to pop up a bunch of different things. What we want to choose is override methods, because remember, we're pretty much inheriting all these methods from the activity class. However, we just want to customize them to add our own custom log message, just so we can see what's going on. So click override methods, and then it's going to give us a bunch of different options to override. So these are saying, okay, what method do you want to use? Pretty much, do you want us to fill in for you? Well, there's actually this method called onStart. So if you scroll down a little bit right here, onStart, and hit OK, there we go. Saves us some time. Again, it took a little bit, it took a while for me to just explain it, but if you're just doing it to yourself, it takes like 5 seconds, so pretty sweet. But anyways, now that we have this onStart method, what I want to do is actually just copy this to add another log that's going to print out on our screen, and I'm just going to add onStart. Now, instead of me doing the exact same thing over and over and over again, what I actually did is I took all of the methods that I want to overwrite and I actually put it on my forum. So if you go to my forum, again, this is the URL. I'll put this below the video if you guys just want to click on it. But check this out. I put all the source code right there, so go ahead and copy this and hop over back to Android Studio and paste it back in. And I actually can delete this because I copied that too. But now it saved you a bunch of typing. Pretty sweet. So all this program is going to do is it's going to print out a little message on the screen every time your activity changes states. Again, you would never want to do this in the actual app. This is just to demonstrate when each of these stages are going to happen, but for this example, it's actually pretty useful. So, like I said before, whenever we use this little log program right here, by default, it's going to be printing out a bunch of random log messages. Pretty much everything that's going on in your phone or your little emulator is going to try to print out. But what we are only interested in are these log messages that we created right here. So we need to build a real quick filter. So to do that, head over to your Android tab right here, click on it, and alright, so those are a bunch of, see, these are all the ones we don't want to see, and this is just because my emulator is running right now. So obviously we want to make a filter, and this is how you do this. And another thing I want to point out is this is just a nice little Easter egg. If you look at this logcat symbol, you're going to see that it's actually the Android head, and this is actually I don't even know how to pronounce it, but you know that YouTube video where it's like that cat that looks like he's attached to a Pop-Tart or something with a rainbow coming out of his butt? That's a little symbol for that. So, I don't know, I just thought that was a cool little Easter egg. Alright, so anyways, back to building our filter. What we're going to say is any log message that has this tag attached, Bucky's message, only show those. So make sure whatever string you have here, copy this. Now in the drop down right here, select Edit Filter Configuration. This allows us to build a filter right here. Now I actually already did this, but my microphone was off, so that's why this is filled in right here. I have a weird microphone, and when you put it up, it mutes itself, and so yeah, I just filmed for about 5 minutes, and then I was trying to edit the video, and I'm like, oh, can't hear anything because I'm a moron. So again, you're gonna have to call yours anything you want. I'm just gonna call mine Bucky Filter, and the only other thing you have to add is by log tag regex, just stick this right in here. So it's gonna say, okay, filter equals built. So now instead of no filters, which show everything, we can only show log messages with this attached. Pretty sweet. So now just go ahead up to here and run your app. Now keep your eye on this little section right here, because whenever our app actually builds itself and pops up, it's going to start displaying those state messages. So of course choose OK and check it out. Alright, so our app is loading and it switched back to this thing, you SOB, so I'm going to switch it back to Bucky's filter, but check this out. Let me position this so you guys can see it. Alright, so the first thing it printed out was on create. Now I already told you guys, and you obviously know what that method does. It pretty much just sets up the interface. Now after that, on start, this method always gets called right after either on create or on restart. So what on start means is pretty much your app is about to start up. That's the most simple I can explain it. Now on resume, what this means is it's a method that always gets called whenever your activity is the one that the user currently has open. So remember, anytime you want to add code that says, okay, the user is now looking at this screen, this is the activity that they have open, you can stick that in on resume. Now just to show you guys some cool stuff, whenever you actually close out of your app, hit the home button right here, look what happens. The first thing it does is it calls on pause, and then it says on save instant state, and then on stop. Now on pause, what this means is the user is no longer seeing your activity. So whenever, of course, I was looking at that screen, now I'm no longer looking at it, then on pause gets called. Now another reason on pause may get called is maybe I just switched screens and I'm now looking at a new one. So again, those are two different times when your app is going to call on pause. Pretty much when your user is looking at the screen and they're not looking at it anymore. Now, instead of talking to you guys about on save instant state in detail and on stop, there's actually a lot more different states than this. What you guys can do is, I found this image online that is absolutely awesome, and I stuck it in that same URL. So what you can see here is a pretty awesome visualization of every single state in your activity. Now again, I wanted to show you guys this because right now, if I talk about every single one of these things in detail, it's probably going to be a little overwhelming and kind of pointless right now. So instead, what I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to talk about these now that we understand what they are and that they do exist. I'm going to talk about each state as we need them. Welcome back, and in this video I want to start talking about designing the user interface. It's one of the more fun and also one of the more easier to understand topics, and actually what I decided to do is instead of working anymore with this, I actually want to start a brand new project. So to close out of this, click File, Close Project, and actually if you just close out of Android Studio, like you want to start a new project, so you just close out of the entire thing and then you open it back up again, then what it's going to do is it would just open up that project again. So if you ever want to get back to this window, you would have to click File, Close Project. So if you're trying to do that and that's why, well, I just explained it for you. So from here, what I want to do is click Start a New Android Studio Project. And you can actually name this anything you want, since we're just going to be like, I don't know, not doing anything real important to it. I'm going to name mine Hand Blaster, because why not? And all of these should be good from last time. Click Next. This is still good. We're still making something for the phone. Now, instead of like last time where we chose blank activity, what this would do is it would make that one default blank screen. But I want to show you guys how to add activities manually. So instead of this, choose Add No Activity. So when you click Finish, what's going to happen is it's going to load up and you're pretty much going to have an empty, completely empty project. I mean, it's going to have those core files, but check it out. Alright, so when it's done setting up, this is what you get. Now, obviously, if we click on Project on the left-hand side, we can see that it does indeed have some files created for us, but definitely no activities or screens anywhere. And well, our app would be pretty stinking useless if the user didn't have any screen to look at. So let's go ahead and do that first. So make sure you're in Android view. You can actually look at project view if you want, but I'm going to be in Android view, and in your app, expand that and go to Java, expand that as well. Now remember, this is where we're going to be building that activity. If you remember from last time, this is actually where that file was. So now if you right click it and select new, scroll down to activity, and we'll just choose blank activity. So again, once we're looking at this screen, what this is basically if we clicked blank activity whenever we're setting up our project, then this is where we would be. But that's how you do it manually. And also whenever you add additional activities to whatever projects we're working on in the future, that's how you do that. So remember it. Now, for right now, this example is only going to have one activity, so I really don't need to give anything like a name because I'm not really going to get disorganized with one activity. However, since this is the only activity, it's very important that you choose this launcher activity. Now remember, the launcher activity is the very first screen that whenever Android is trying to open your app, it's going to look for this. So without it, if you have a bunch of activities and none of them are the launcher activity, then your app's not going to open correctly. So since this is our only activity, we need to make it the launcher activity, aka the starting point. So as soon as you create an activity, what Android Studio is going to do is it's going to create those two files for us. Let me make sure this looks nice and pretty for you guys. Alright, so of course, you remember that main activity, that Java, the brains behind it, and the interface. No need to discuss everything because you guys already know what all that means. So one other thing I want to point out is you're like, okay, wait a minute, there was one more thing. You said that all of my activities had to be taken care of in the manifest. So let me just look at the manifest, and we'll probably have to do something here, open this, and oh, check it out. Android Studio actually took care of all of that for us. Whenever we just created that new activity, again, in the manifest, this is where all your activities have to be declared. It did everything for us. Pretty stinking awesome. That is also another reason I love Android Studio. So just close out of that and we can continue with the good stuff. So over in activity underscore main.xml, the first thing I want to do is delete this little thing right here, this text view. So just go ahead, select it like before, and just delete it. Now, just for this example, this is just to demonstrate a few things. So I'll say that I'm building the very first page to the best social network ever, thenewboston.com. Not like I'm biased or anything. I mean, it's not even like it's my social network. But anyways, so what we need are couple things. The first thing is this large text. Alright, so that's a little bit easier to read. I'm just gonna organize everything before I start customizing any of these widgets. So drag in large text, and we'll say that this says like sign in or login. So this will be the login screen. So under this, of course, we need two little input areas for the user to enter their login information, an email and a password. So first, let's get that email, scroll down, it's actually under text fields, so click that if it's not expanded in for email, just drag that over and we can tell when it's aligned with the middle because of this little green line, so drop that right there. Alright, looks pretty good. Now under here, we'll have a password field, so drag that and drop it somewhere under there, looks good. Now, of course, if I was actually designing this, then what I would do is I would have to make a little text area here that says email and password. But for right now, just demonstrating some stuff, this is, simple enough. Now, of course, after they're done typing in their information, they need some button to click on. So if we scroll way back up, isn't way back up, it's like 2 inches away. But we're going to select this button and drag it right underneath here, and we'll actually align this in the dead center of your app by using those little alignment things. And alright, looking pretty good. So what I want to do now is I actually want to change the text on this right here and also on the button. So again, this is a login screen, so if I hop over, actually I'll change one this way. So select this large text view element. If we scroll down to a property called text, then what we can see is, okay, right now it's set to large text. That's the text that displays. What we actually want to do is click on this, and we'll change it to something like sign in. and hit enter.
Okay, so actually a while ago, no, we're able to discuss about the activity state, no. As it is known that every Android app has at least one activity associated with it. So with the application begins to execute and runs, there are various state changes. Now that activity goes through different events, some user trigger and some system triggered can cause an activity to do the transitions from one state to another. All the state changes association with the activity to do the transitions from one state to another, no? And of course, when a certain event occurs, each activity has to go through different stages to an Android life cycle. So the state of activity is managed by maintaining the activity task in which the new activity is on the top of the stack and the rest of the activity is below in stack in order of the time they have been put in the stack. So imagine three activities. One is a running state. The second activity is just minimized and is running in the background. And the third activity is also running in the background but has gone from foreground and back to background earlier than the second activity. So there is the first activity will be on the top of the stack and third activity will be at the bottom at the stack and second activity will be at the middle of the stack. Actually, there are 7 states of the activity life cycle. Out of these 7 states, now it is sure that the activity will be any of the 7 states depending on the event that occurred. We have on create, on start, on restart, on resume, on pause, no, on stop, on destroy, and so on. So to have detailed information, of course, how the activity states work and what is the changes that activity undergoes in each state, we need to understand the activity life cycle in Android, no? Again, as I mentioned, there are many events that can lead to a configuration change of the application, which ultimately causes state change of the activities. And we have the changing the orientation of the app, no? We have switching between the apps in multi-window screen. We have activity or dialogue appears in the foreground. The user taps the back button, of course, as our event leading to configuration change and state. A while ago, we also discussed about the UI design in Android, no? Or the user interface design in Android. UI or user interface design in Android is a graphical representation of a views, no, displayed on a smartphone or tablet. It allows users to interact with the features, functions, and contents of the application. To design UI, you need no prior actually no programming knowledge. Although it is nice to have web designing skills or programming skills. Every application has a user interface with which users can interact. Android provides various pre-built UI components that allow you to build a GUI, no, for your application. Android also provides other UI modules for special interfaces such as dialogues, notification, menu, and others. So there are many components for the Android application. Let's consider a few of them here. Of course, the main action bar, split action bar, and the content area. So this display a significant role while developing a complex Android application. So in the views component, no, views are used to wait, wait for a while. Okay, sorry for the inconvenience. Of course, Again, as what I mentioned, no, views are used to customize user interface design. No, a view is considered as a building block for a proper user interface created from the view class. No, excuse. A view can also be defined as a small rectangular box, no, in Android. No, a while ago, as a we have a demonstration, no, wherein you could able to develop that respond to the user's input. For example, buttons, checks boxes, and others. Basically, a view is what a user sees and interacts with. No, so view group naman po is an invisible container of other views, no, such as child view and other view groups. No, so this view class is a super class of all the GUI components in Android. So views play a key role in the development of an application because you need setting present in the application. So color, style, themes, and others. So in the Android, no, studio, we commonly use a view called edit text and images. So images are classified as widgets used to create an interactive UI component, such as button, of course. No, buttons, text field, and others. Now, layout as a subclass of view group. The layout defines the visual, of course, structure of the UI of the user applications. All elements in the layout are built using a hierarchy of views and view group subjects. No? Wait for a while. May call lang. Okay, so again, layout are keeps in the folder called resources. So Android Studio creates a default XML layout file in the resources layout folder. That is extremely useful if you know the basic at the time of compiling. So ano bang advantage ng XML layout, no? Siyempre, there are many advantages of XML layout. It is an immensely popular and widely used format. It helps provide the UI component from the logic, which in turn provides the flexibility to change one component without affecting the other. It's much more easier to generate than writing direct code, and it allows the easier drag and drop to generate interfaces for the Android application. The types of layout, no, Androids provide a number of layouts that provide different views to use in this application. Katulad nung linear layout, meron tayong frame layout, no? Meron tayong relative layout, table layout, constraint layout, no? And when it comes to the units of measurement, there are a number of measurement units used in Android Studio. Meron tayong DP, density independent pixel, SP, scale independent pixel, PX, the pixel, and PT. So the steps to follow in UI design is download Android Studio from your browser, install Android Studio, open Android Studio, create a new project and select project type, give it a name of your choice, click on the resources folder and click the layout folder and begin to design your UI experience, no? Yun yung steps kung paano ginagawa si UI, no? Designing the user interface, no?
Alright guys, welcome back. And in this video, I want to start talking about
Okay, I'll just want to share a video presentation.
Alright guys, welcome back, and in this video I want to start talking about designing the user interface. It's one of the more fun and also one of the more easier to understand topics, and actually what I decided to do is instead of working anymore with this, I actually want to start a brand new project. So to close out of this, click File, Close Project, and actually if you just close out of Android Studio, like you want to start a new project, so you just close out of the entire thing and then you open it back up again, then what it's going to do is it would just open up that project again. So if you ever want to get back to this window, you would have to click File, Close Project. So if you're trying to do that and that's why, well, I just explained it for you. So from here, what I want to do is click Start a New Android Studio Project. And you can actually name this anything you want, since we're just going to be like, I don't know, not doing anything real important to it. I'm going to name mine Hand Blaster, because why not? And all of these should be good from last time. Click Next. This is still good. We're still making something for the phone. Now, instead of like last time where we chose blank activity, what this would do is it would make that one default blank screen. But I want to show you guys how to add activities manually. So instead of this, choose Add No Activity. So when you click Finish, what's going to happen is it's going to load up and you're pretty much going to have an empty, completely empty project. I mean, it's going to have those core files, but check it out. Alright, so when it's done setting up, this is what you get. Now, obviously, if we click on Project on the left-hand side, we can see that it does indeed have some files created for us, but definitely no activities or screens anywhere. And well, our app would be pretty stinking useless if the user didn't have any screen to look at. So let's go ahead and do that first. So make sure you're in Android view. You can actually look at project view if you want, but I'm going to be in Android view, and in your app, expand that and go to Java, expand that as well. Now remember, this is where we're going to be building that activity. If you remember from last time, this is actually where that file was. So now if you right click it and select New, scroll down to Activity and we'll just choose Blank Activity. So again, once we're looking at this screen, what this is basically if we clicked Blank Activity whenever we're setting up our project, then this is where we would be. But that's how you do it manually. And also, whenever you add additional activities to whatever projects we're working on in the future, that's how you do that. So remember it. Now, for right now, this example is only going to have one activity, so I really don't need to give anything like a name because I'm not really going to get disorganized with one activity. However, since this is the only activity, it's very important that you choose this launcher activity. Now remember, the launcher activity is the very first screen that whenever Android is trying to open your app, it's going to look for this. So without it, if you have a bunch of activities and none of them are the launcher activity, then your app's not going to open correctly. So since this is our only activity, we need to make it the launcher activity, aka the starting point. So as soon as you create an activity, what Android Studio is going to do is it's going to create those two files for us. Let me make sure this looks nice and pretty for you guys. Alright, so of course, you remember that main activity, that Java, the brains behind it, and the interface. No need to discuss everything because you guys already know what all that means. So one other thing I want to point out is you're like, okay, wait a minute, there was one more thing. You said that all of my activities had to be taken care of in the manifest. So let me just look at the manifest, and we'll probably have to do something here, open this, and oh, check it out. Android Studio actually took care of all of that for us. Whenever we just created that new activity, again, in the manifest, this is where all your activities have to be declared. It did everything for us. Pretty stinking awesome. That is also another reason I love Android Studio. So just close out of that and we can continue with the good stuff. So over in activity underscore main.xml, the first thing I want to do is delete this little thing right here, this text view. So just go ahead, select it like before, and just delete it. Now, just for this example, this is just to demonstrate a few things. So I'll say that I'm building the very first page to the best social network ever, thenewboston.com. Not like I'm biased or anything. I mean, it's not even like it's my social network. But anyways, so what we need are a couple things. The first thing is this large text. Alright, so that's a little bit easier to read. I'm just going to organize everything before I start customizing any of these widgets. So drag in large text And we'll say that this says like sign in or login. So this will be the login screen. So under this, of course, we need two little input areas for the user to enter their login information, an email and a password. So first, let's get that email. Scroll down. It's actually under text fields. So click that if it's not expanded. And for email, just drag that over, and we can tell when it's aligned with the middle because of this little green line. So drop that right there. Alright, looks pretty good. Now under here, we'll have a password field. So drag that and drop it somewhere under there. Looks good. Now, of course, if I was actually designing this, then what I would do is I would have to make a little text area here that says email and password. But for right now, just demonstrating some stuff, this is, simple enough. Now, of course, after they're done typing in their information, they need some button to click on. So if we scroll way back up, isn't way back up, it's like 2 inches away. But we're gonna select this button and drag it right underneath here, and we'll actually align this in the dead center of your app by using those little alignment things. And alright, looking pretty good. So what I want to do now is I actually want to change the text on this right here and also on the button. So again, this is a login screen, so if I hop over, actually I'll change one this way. So select this large text view element. If we scroll down to a property called text, then what we can see is, okay, right now it's set to large text. That's the text that displays. What we actually want to do is click on this, and we'll change it to something like sign in and hit enter.
Okay, so this will be an additional video presentation for the more user interface. Kasi as a developer, no, hindi pwedeng isang design lang, isang user experience. Dapat as much as possible, especially kung available na sa market yung ganong design, dapat nag-iisip tayo ng panibago or additional design. Okay?
So of course we can change the text that way. Alright, pretty sweet. Now if we hop over to the source code view, then let's go ahead and change the text on the button through here. So of course right now it just says new button. That's the default. Let's go ahead and change this to, for some reason I don't like when the button text is the same as the title text, so I'm going to change this to log in. Alright, sweet. So the title says sign in and this says log in. Now another thing that's kind of annoying me is I hate when there's not enough space for the user to actually type in their information, and these little edit text areas, or inputs if you call them if you're a web designer, they're kind of like bunched, not enough room there. So what I'm going to do is in this first one, I'm going to add a new attribute, and the attribute to actually just make this a little bit wider is Android, Android, and its width. Now I'll talk to you guys about you see that whenever you're alright, I probably should mention this. So if you're a web designer, you probably use either pixels or percentage or EM if you work with text a lot. However, whenever you're making apps, you're going to use these special things called DP, and those are device pixels. And I'll talk to you guys about the different units of measurement right now, but just so you guys have a real basic understanding, if you had a phone that was high def, for example, so it was 1920 by 1080 or even 1280 by 720, that just means how many pixels are on there. You could have a computer screen or a TV that's 1280 by 720, or you could have a little phone that's 1280 by 720. So if you try to work with pixels, you really don't know how big a pixel is because the size of a pixel changes from device to device. So if you use these DP, they give you a little bit more control, and again, that's just why we use DP for right now. I'll talk more about that later. It's going to make a lot more sense. But for right now, I want to change this to something like 320 DP wide, because I know that that is a good width right there, and I actually want to do the same for this right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that, scroll down, and paste that into. So now both of these things are 320 wide, looking pretty sweet. So let's hop back over in Designer, and alright, I mean, this interface is looking beautiful right now. However, there's one other little thing that I want to point out. So select the top text view widget, the sign-in title, and whenever you select it, you're going to notice that there is a light bulb on the left-hand side. So let's go ahead and click this and find out what's this about. Okay, hard-coded string. Okay, so it's giving us a little warning message, and what this warning message is saying is what you should do is, instead of just writing a string in there like we just did, you should treat this as a resource. So let me first show you guys how to treat this as a resource, and then I'm going to tell you exactly why. So make sure, again, you select your widget, click the light bulb, now click the little right arrow next to here, and choose extract string resource. It's kind of hard to say. So right here, what we're pretty much doing is, I don't want to say that this is a variable because it's technically a resource, but if you never worked with like XML before, or resources, or you never developed for Android before, you're probably not really familiar with this. What we pretty much need to do is give a nickname to this string. So I'm just going to name it something like sign in title, and then that's it. Click OK. Now as you can see, what's going to happen is, instead of sign in title like we had, it changes to this weird @string sign in title thing. So let's hop over in the source code and look what's going on. So of course it changed back to sign in as it should, but if we look at the text now, we still have a reference to the resource instead of the string itself. So what exactly is happening? Well, to understand, what we need to do is we actually need to open a new file, and this file is under app, just like before, res, this actually stands for resource. Now under values, you're going to have a file called strings.xml. Now, alright, let me adjust my seat because I'll explain this. So the reason that we needed to make this a resource is because we're pretty much saying, put all of the strings in one place, in one file, and then I'm just going to reference them through XML. So again, whenever we reference a string, it's going to look in this file, it's going to look for that resource name, and this one was sign in title, and then it's going to say, okay, that was actually equal to sign in. So that's the value of this. Now if we did something like sign in with an exclamation mark, we can just switch over and that would change, no problem. So again, what we're doing is we're pretty much putting a placeholder right here, and it references something else. Now you were wondering, okay, well, what was the problem with just writing sign in my source code right here? Why'd it give me a hard time? Well, the reason that it wants all of your strings in one place, it's because if you ever do something like you want to translate your app to Spanish, well, what you can do is you can actually just say, okay, you don't have to look around your entire app and say, okay, this is a string, now this is a string, now I have to go to 100 other activities and find all of those. No, you just look at one file, it has all the strings for your entire app, and you just translate it right there. And there's a bunch of other useful things too, but pretty much it makes your app's life a whole lot easier when all the strings are organized in one file. So that's why we did that, and also, since this is a string as well, it's probably a good idea to do it to this. So again, select your button, click the light bulb, right arrow, extract string resource, and for this I'll just call it something like, I don't know, like sign in button text. Then choose OK, and of course, if we can see, on our button, instead of that text, we have a reference to it, but of course whenever we're running our app, they don't see this weird reference symbol. And again, Anytime you see an at sign, that means that this isn't a hard-coded string, this is actually a reference to something else. So again, that's what's going on right there. Now, one other thing I want to point out is this. So we're going to be referencing a bunch of stuff, and we know why that's useful right now. And actually, go into your strings.xml file and close this out, because typically we're not going to have that open. However, what if you wanted to change the text to this? Well, you can go back in the folder, go all the way, find that file again, but that takes a lot of time. So instead, what you can do is in the source code, that XML, press down Control on your keyboard, and you see whenever you do this, then you can actually hover over these references. Now click. And whenever you click it, it opens up that file again. So pretty sweet. Again, I don't know, maybe you want to change that sign in to, I don't know, maybe you want to get rid of that symbol at the end. Again, hold down Control, and this actually works for any reference, but what we want to do is click that. The file opens again, and that line of code is actually highlighted. So now I can close that, and boom, check it out. So those are some really cool tips, and now you guys know how to manually add activities. You guys also know how to add strings as a reference. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Now, one other thing I want to mention before I let you guys go is this. So right now we're making something called a static layout. It's a layout that's not going to change. We don't want to make like a sign-in form where the button's like floating around and the user has to click it to sign in. I mean, if you're making a game, that would be great. But for right now, we always want everything to be in the same place. However, there are going to be some layouts, maybe like the stream, if you're reading like a bunch of posts, that actually change. So of course that feed goes up and down as you scroll with your thumb, and also with games, maybe there's like a bird flying around that you have to click, or maybe you have to like make tanks that are moving around. Well, whenever you need a layout that's interactive like games, then we're going to need to do something special. And what we actually do is, instead of using this, the designer in the XML, we're going to be making our layout in Java. It's going to be pretty sweet, but also pretty easy to understand. So yeah, I'm pumped up. That's what I'm going to be teaching you guys in the next tutorial, how to make interactive layouts. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will smell you later.
No? Based on the given presentation, no, we discussed about more user interface, no, when it comes to this Android user interface, no. Again, as I mentioned earlier, no, this will be the set of visual elements that make up, no, an Android app, no. And this include things like buttons, text fields, images, and any other graphical elements, no. Creating a well-designed UI is important for two reasons. Number one, a good UI will make your app more enjoyable and easy to use for the users, no. If your app is difficult to use or not visually appealing, people will likely not use it for very long. Second, a well-designed UI can help you stand out in the Google, no, Play Store, no. With over 1 million apps available, it's important to do anything you can to make your app look better than the competitions, no. So we have a multiple screen sizes, no, dealing with multiple devices, creating a well-designed UI, no, and there are few things to keep in mind when designing your UI, no, as I mentioned earlier. Layout, no, buttons and controls, images and graphics, typography and colors must be considered, no. So I think that's it for today, no. And I encountered no problems with one of your classmates. She was not able to join, but I will share to her our video presentation for her to review. So it's too early, no? But I instructed you to perform all the video presentations demonstration earlier at your own, no? So I think that's it for today.